everyone, I'm Josh Jones. Thanks for tuning in to today's webinar, Enhancing Hiring Practices Through Skills-Based Talent Acquisition. We are so glad you're here. Today's discussion is going to be led by Lisej Laj, and our panelists are Trent Cotton and Lindsay Bowman. Today's webinar has been made possible by our good friends at CoderPad. Please notice that there's a chat feature, as always, at the right-hand side of your screen. That's a really good place for general discussion. There's also a Q&A tab. If you've got questions for our panelists today, please try to direct your questions to the Q&A tab. Today's webinar is being recorded, and by the end of the day today, you will receive an email from us with a link to the playback. Lisej is going to drive today's conversation, so I'm going to turn off my camera, but I'll be cheering you on from the sidelines, and I will be watching the chat.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thanks, Joshua. So wonderful. So hello, everyone. My name is Lisej Solage. A little bit about me. I am currently the co-host of Your Corporate IQ podcast and also a recruiter consultant at the moment. Been in talent acquisition and recruiting, my goodness, for 13 years. I don't know where that time went. So I've worked for Marriott International, supporting executive recruitment and DEI sourcing, as well as a senior recruiter for Volvo as well. So just been in this business for quite some time, and so excited to have this conversation and excited to converse with Lindsay and Trent. So on to you, Trent.
Oh, you're going to, okay. So I see how you two are going to go. All right.
I'm going to call on you.
Chatting. Okay, I got it. All right. So just for the audience, I was telling them that I'm so used to ladies going first. So I understand it. Trent Cotton, I'm the Vice President of Talent and Culture with Hatchworks Technologies. We are a U.S.-based technology solutions builder provider, but we've got employees throughout Latin America and the U.S. I converted to the dark side in 2004. I spent the first part of my career leading sales organizations, doing corporate finance and all that kind of fun, sexy stuff, and decided to make a move and got into recruiting because I hated working with recruiters and I thought I could do it better. 20 years later, I'm still trying.
Cool. I'm Lindsay. So excited to be here and talking about this with you all. I manage recruiting teams and recruiting operation teams at Udemy currently. I've been in talent acquisition for 14 years, started out on the agency side and then moved over into tech and have been there ever since. But really excited to be having this conversation because it connects a lot to what Udemy's platform does in helping people develop their skills. And this is a topic we've been talking about for a long time. So excited to be having this conversation.
Awesome. Great. Before we dive in, I wanted to share some recent articles from SHRM regarding skills-based hiring before we kind of get into the questions and for context purposes. So the article mentions skills-based hiring requires a commitment to change, which I agree with. Employers are showing interest in skills-based hiring, where they're moving beyond education and experience requirements to focus on skills match between candidates and roles, right? So as employers face talent shortages, they're more receptive to the skills-based model, which makes sense. It's a hot topic this year. More employers are becoming aware that assessing candidates based on their abilities and potential rather than their degrees and job histories could relieve talent shortages, yes, increase diversity, and also strengthen internal mobility in the workplace. So I agree with all that. More interesting news, the federal government wants to lead by example with skills-based hiring. President Joe Biden signed an executive order that includes the recruitment practice of employers focusing on candidates' hands-on skills rather than education. So the federal government's on board as well. Just interesting facts.
Very.
Yes.
It's just ironic to hear government leading the way. Scary. But I do think it's really interesting. You know, I've noticed a lot of articles and I've noticed a huge shift in large organizations. Now, you know, stuff like this, like change and things, a lot of times kind of the small to mid-sized companies, they'll do it just because, you know, they're fighting for talent. Usually you don't see these large mammoth companies doing the same. But actually right after COVID, I started seeing some of these large companies, they were actually leading the way, which was an eye-opener for me.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast recently that did a study on IBM, actually, speaking of large companies, um, leading the way with skills-based hiring and some of the requirements that they've taken off of jobs. And then actually government-wise, there are 10 states that have now taken off, they've committed to taking off the education requirement on a lot of their roles. So again, thinking about just how much this has permeated through all sectors, different size hiring organizations too.
It's an exciting time in TA because I think for the longest time, our hands were bound a little bit. So this is giving us, and especially those of us that are in TA because of the intrinsic value, and I like to remind recruiters that you're not just affecting the individual that you're extending the offer to. You could be having a transformative impact on an entire generation, by giving them a job that helps them break the cycle of poverty that they grew up in. And if we can just do that one step at a time, and if this is the first step of it, I'm all on board. Let's do it.
I'm officially inspired.
Huh?
I said I'm officially inspired.
Good.
I love that. I love that, the elevation of our work. You know what I mean? I'm here for all of that.
Absolutely. Well, sometimes it's the only thing that gets us through because, we are the whipping post of most organizations. But if we recenter and focus on that bright spot, I think it just kind of helps you get out of the bed with a smile.
Yeah, definitely. Especially the last couple of years since the pandemic. Refocusing on our purpose and how we're impacting things. Sometimes that's really the key to getting through it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we are building organizations. That's it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's dive in. First question for the panel. You guys ready?
Let's do it.
Okay. So in the skills-based hiring model, in your experience, are the education requirements removed from the job descriptions, or is it more of just an understanding as you go through the recruitment process? Curious about this.
It's 50-50. It really depends because my role is a little bit different. So we do staff augmentation. So we're a little bit of an agency, but then I'm also internal. So some clients are a little old school. They still like to keep that education requirement on there. Others, I find that whenever we're consulting and just say, hey, why don't we put this as a preferred, or a strike down the middle is, a 4-year degree and this number of years of experience, 2 years of experience or 6 years of experience doing a similar role, so that way, I find that kind of middle of the road helps the client get over. And you mentioned it earlier with the change management, that's, kind of cracking that door open a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say for me and for my team, so we're in the tech industry, and so a lot of times we can be a little bit edgier in those areas. So unless a role actually requires a degree that shows a qualification, like a legal role or some sort of certification, I'm actually a huge proponent of in the kickoff meeting if we have a job description that states that we need a degree, we really push our hiring managers to take it off. And the way that we do that is we'll walk through and we'll understand what skills are needed for the role. And we'll say, okay, if I had someone who had these two, they were really solid at it. Do you actually need a degree? Do they need a degree to be able to display those skills? If not, we're going to delete it altogether. I've also had some pushback for those of you who might be going through this right now, where I had a hiring manager who really liked people with master's degrees. And so we really unpacked that. And I think part of their reasoning on why they liked that is because it showed that from their point of view, these people came through with a more broader understanding of business experience, kind of like a stick-to-itness. And again, peeled that back. Okay, we have that. Could they display it in this way? Can we design interview questions that will display their stick-to-itness? If they keep getting promoted year over year, doesn't that prove that? And so really breaking it down and helping hiring managers see that, again, there might be circumstances where that absolutely has to be there, understood, like a legal degree. But other than that, I actually just a lot of times will remove it and put a comment on the Google Doc and say, I'm removing this.
That's for forgiveness, right?
Right. Well, a lot of it is you have to know your hiring managers. You have to build that trust in that relationship, and then you have that data and that information to back up why you're doing that, right? And that can also help establish that trust.
I love that. I mean, coming in as a consultant from the beginning, love that. You're already talking about that consultancy. And I love that you're starting all the way at the beginning in terms of the job description. So not everyone is doing that all the way at the beginning. So that could be during the intake or kickoff meeting, as you called it. But you're starting even with the job description. I like that.
Yeah.
And I think Wendy asked a question, and in the move to skill-based hiring, how do you help hiring managers better define what, quote, 5 years of experience means? And I think, Lindsay just nailed it. It's in that intake. And one of the things, especially for your very laborious managers, it's called root cause analysis, but you're asking the 5 whys. I want this in here. Okay, why? Well, I want that. Okay, why? And you'll find that usually by the 4th why, they're like, I don't know why I'm doing that. I was like, okay, then fantastic. Let's strike it, And then 2, just to kind of piggyback a little bit on what Lindsay said about establishing that credibility in the relationship with the manager. I know that I've arrived at that level with the client whenever I can go, yeah, we're not doing that. And they go, oh, okay. It's like, okay, we've got that understanding, but it does take time. And I think what I find, especially in recruiters that have only been doing it 2 or 3 years, or maybe they're in a new world that they don't feel really, maybe they recruited in banking and now they're recruiting in medical and they feel like they're starting all over. They don't push the manager in that hiring intake. That is your role. And believe it or not, when done correctly with a diplomatic backbone, that establishes credibility quicker than anything else in the world. And especially if you can push them and say, I don't think that we need this. And then you find them a candidate that doesn't have that blows their socks off. Oh man, the next time they're like, okay, hey, Lindsay, what do you think I should do? Just write the job description, you figure out the salary, tell me this is what I need, But it does take a diplomatic backbone and having some courage to be able to ask. And I think that if you do it in an intellectually curious way, it is very easy for the manager to kind of come down and not feel like you're challenging them per se. You're actually just really trying to understand the role.
I think that's a really good point, if I can add on that too, where it has to be done in a way where they aren't feeling called out or like defensive. So thinking of like understanding human behavior, right? If people don't like to be told you're wrong or you're not doing that, you haven't thought about this in all of these ways. So just handling it in a way of saying, hey, I'd like to remove this. Here's why. Or I recommend. That's kind of what I use most often. I recommend removing this. Here's the reason why. And it's even better if you can have that in a verbal conversation so they can understand how you're coming across as opposed to, well, like I said, the hiring managers that I trust and know really well, I'll just make a comment on Google Docs. But as you're building that relationship, help them understand where you're coming from and understand where they're coming from too.
Yeah, it's all in how you massage it. That's what I call it, right? I mean, you have to have that courage to Trent's point, but also the massaging has to take place as well. It's like, come with, I'm supporting you. I'm here to support you. I'm helping you to get to that decision. And it's through that consultation that you're doing that. So I love that. Both comments. I love it.
And play dumb. Even if you know the answer, play dumb. And especially for your egotistical leaders, let them think they're leading and just manipulate the heck out of them on the way there, but don't let them know that you're doing it. And the best way to do it is by playing dumb.
Yes, I love this. I love it. For both of you, in lieu of education requirements, do you see an increase in more certification requirements in lieu of the education?
I would say not necessarily. I think, again, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
It said my AirPods took over and they're not on or anything, but I think in some cases it's applicable and in others it's not. And so thinking about like the definition of a skill is the ability to perform something well and possibly like repeatedly, right? And so certifications could show that. They could also show that you sat on a training and that you received a certification afterwards. It doesn't actually prove that you weren't playing games on your phone the whole time, or it doesn't actually prove that you retained every bit of information, right? So I think from our side, we are not seeing certifications kind of take over in lieu of that. We're really focusing on skills and defining those during the kickoff process, and then attaching questions to that assess the skills, as opposed to using a certification as a pure assessment. Now, again, there are exceptions of, like, if we're looking for someone who's highly skilled in AWS and they're building out our architecture, we're going to look for some of those certifications, because those are some of those tested, proven knowledge and skill assessments.
Yeah, I think especially in the tech world, this is, the certifications are important. But most interview processes, you have a coding challenge. So they're already testing your skill. I think it's a little bit harder if I think back to some of my pre-tech days. If I'm hiring a salesperson in commercial banking, I can look at their portfolio, but I can't really go on a client call with them. I can't really look at, will they complete a pipeline thing? So it is kind of hard to do that skill-based stuff versus some of the more technical positions, or even the craft positions where, you actually need a certification in order to work on this. Now, let's just be clear. If I have to go to the ER, I want a licensed, certified, gone to school for 12 years doctor, not someone that went through a boot camp. Okay.
Understood.
now, a developer, I'll take a boot camp, because they actually, chances are that boot camp curriculum was designed to get them hired. Where, let's face it, in the US, most higher education, for instance, whenever my minor was statistics and finance, but I was working in banking. And of course, I had to take accounting. I'm like, you don't do this in the real world. You don't do this in the real world. But I couldn't tell the professor that, because in their mind, that was the real world. I think in boot camps, they actually design, I know I've worked with a couple that said, what are you looking for? Let us design the curriculum around it. So it's almost just like an absolute funnel, but it's based on the skills. It's not based on they went to MIT. But at the bank, we ran into some issues, because, you had the managers that wanted to hire from the sexy universities like MIT or UTD or some of the rest of them, but they couldn't afford them. And plus, we were also trying to move them, they wanted everyone to relocate to Birmingham, Alabama. So how are you going to recruit someone from MIT to move to? Anyway, that was a whole thing in and of itself. Found a boot camp that was local, was government funded, and it hit a couple of different areas for me. First, I was desperately trying to fix our DEI. It was way out of whack in our engineering group. This particular government funded group serviced low to moderate income areas and had a diversity requirement for the class members. So fantastic. I don't have to worry about diversifying my candidate pool. It's right there. Then we were able to go in and help with the curriculum. We actually brought in some of our tech people as adjunct professors. So they were interviewing these candidates, as they're going through the school. And we ran a side-by-side test. So for 1 year, I've tracked the 10 sexy schools candidates that we hired at $85,000 as an average base salary, and the boot camp that we did at an average 20 grand less. At the end of that first year, one in the first group was remaining. Everybody else had left. 8 out of the 10 in the boot camp remained and had already gotten promoted. And so another way to kind of help, I know one of the questions was, how do you get your hiring managers over this? Managers are data driven. Give them the data. Run an A/B test, and for me, I was able to go in and say, I don't want to spend any more money going to UTD and MIT and all these other sexy schools. I want to go all in on this boot camp, because it helped with the retention, helped with DEI. And I mean, all of you love the candidates or love the employees because you promoted them before the first year. It was a win-win, but I had to have the data.
Mm-hmm. There's actually, McKinsey released some data that showed that people hired in skills-based cohorts have better retention. So similar to like your point, what you just shared anecdotally, find that research and share it with hiring managers. I would also say that think creatively about your interview process and for someone like we're hiring for senior financial analysts right now. And we're absolutely assessing them based off of their skills in the interview process. In some cases, there might be like for marketing roles, maybe there's an opportunity for some sort of presentation, or for sales roles, I believe our team does like a territory plan. Like, how would you like walk us through how you would think through this territory? So think about examples and opportunities to build those into your interview process. So like, while you can't jump on a call with someone, you can at least understand how they might approach some of those things. And that will start to help you assess that specific skill that you're looking to assess.
I like this. I think it's both things, right? So it's the certifications when necessary, but also I like what you also said, Lindsay, in terms of sometimes you need to pull back the performative layer of things as well. It's not all about the shiny certifications, or to Trent's point, a shiny school. We really need to dig into what are the skills that are needed. So I really like that.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I was honestly just breathing. You're good.
Oh, okay. I saw Christine asked a question about how our compensation team is benchmarking those roles if they're not clearly defined. So the thing is that they are clearly defined. People are just using more of a skills-based job description. Hiring managers, I should say, are using more of a skills-based approach and skills-based hiring, job description. And I work at a company where we have really robust leveling framework in our focus areas that they can then also say, okay, I'm looking for this skill, and at this level, this is how we would expect that to show up in this role. So sometimes like I think it might be Radford. You can look up like Radford level explanations. It's like the learning to tie knots, can teach others to tie knots, is like the knot tying master. And it kind of helps you understand how the levels all translate. So yeah, Christine, it comes back to the hiring manager understanding what skills are needed and then putting it into their job description. And then our compensation team uses that to assign a range.
Yes, yes. Before we dive into some of the other questions, I know we will get to those, but I do have a curiosity question about OFCCP requirements around skills-based hiring. Are there some different requirements in this space as it relates to posting and tracking? And there might not be. There might not be anything different that we're doing there.
So. No,
okay.
God, OFCCP gives me PTSD. At one place I was going through a divorce and merger and an OFCCP audit all at the same time. I was like, I don't know who I have ticked off in the cosmos, but I'm willing to make amends. I think as long as in the job description you are outlining these are the skills that we're going to hire, and this is how we're going to evaluate you, and then your recruiting process emulates that and verifies that, then you should be okay. Because OCCP is not going to come in and go, you have to have an educational requirement on there. ADA and EEOC are not going to do that, because if you do that, then you're going to limit the candidate pool. That's right? So this is a good faith effort and a great way to be able to further diversify and open up your candidate pool. You just need to make sure that your recruiters are going in. If you're under OFCCP, you have to provide dispositions as part of it. You need to make sure that you do have dispositions that are related to more skill-based disqualification versus qualification disqualification. It's just an extra step, but it's to me, I would rather stand up in defense of this to OCCP than some of the other things that I've had to stand up and defend.
Awesome. Okay. Just a curiosity question for me. I'll throw those out there. I think this question gets to at least one of the questions I saw in the chat. When it comes to the intake meeting, so at that stage of the process, what are some good questions that recruiters can ask to understand the skills that are needed and also the skills priorities? Because we have, those are two separate things. What are the must-haves versus the preferences as it relates to skills?
That was a hard one, Lindsay. I'll let you go first.
Yeah. How nice of you. Yeah. So I think that Okay, let me try to hit everything. Let me know if I miss anything. I think a big part for me is that my team understands the job. They put in the work to understand the role itself, but also the function, how it works within our company, and what that role's impact would be. In terms of creating specific questions, Chat GPT can give you a really great start. And you can even start with, I tested it this morning on, I had a job description and I said, create, what was my prompt? It was something to the effect of create performance and skills-based questions, interview questions based off of this job description. And it gave me 5 skills. It gave me about 3 questions for each skill. And I would say start there. So use ChatGPT. Don't take it blindly. I think we all know at this point, like, don't take it blindly, make it your own, make sure that it makes sense, but it can give you a good start. I don't know about you guys, but once I get like my brain flowing, it just goes. Sometimes getting started is the hardest part. So I would say start there. There was a second part to that question. Oh, the priorities, right? Mm-hmm. So again, I think this comes back to like learning and understanding the role. And sometimes if it's a brand new role, you kind of have to test it out. But go educate yourself on it. Again, I've used ChatGPT as an educator. A personal example, about a year ago, we went through a reduction in force, and it came down to me and one other person to hold down the tech recruiting function here in North America. So I picked up roles. And one of those was a senior staff data scientist, specifically focused on deep learning and figuring out how to incorporate Gen AI into our product. I have never worked on a data science role before. I've worked on a lot of roles, but never that. And so I got on ChatGPT. I mean, I had my hiring manager, I asked her a lot of questions, hit a lot of roadblocks, got on ChatGPT and started asking it, what is a complex problem that someone in this role would solve? What is a simple problem? So like really think about the core things that the role is going to be performing. You can ask questions in the kickoff call, like, what would you expect this person to deliver in a year? What are some things that this team has recently delivered? That will give you an idea of some of the problems that they're solving. And then go take that and like learn as much as you can, so that you have that information. And then you can come back and you can help with the prioritization. If somebody's telling you that it's a priority and you have a feeling that it might not be a priority, dig into that. And then kind of like I said at the beginning, sorry, Trent, I'm just really going on this one.
But I don't have to, you're good.
Of having the conversation, don't be afraid to have the conversation with them of, hey, we're in this together. I'm partnering with you. So I'm counting on you to give me feedback. I'm going to be giving you feedback. I feel like this one is not as much of a priority as it sounds, and here's why. Yeah. And then let me ask you this question. If you're saying you need these 4 skills, but if you have these 3 and they were really solid, do you really need that 4th one? And then all of a sudden that becomes a nice to have, right? And so you can keep that, because like as recruiters, we want to under promise, over deliver, right? Like you can hold on to that, but then you also have it in your back pocket if it really isn't a realistic ask. Did I answer all parts of that?
Oh my goodness, did you? I love that. I love that. I exactly wanted you to talk about those. I said skills priorities for that reason, because it's back to that consultancy once again, right? Sometimes we have to prioritize, and sometimes all of those skills that the hiring manager said they needed, they don't. And so you have to circle back to those things when you're consulting with that hiring manager to say, hey, we talked about these 10 skills that you said that you needed, but let's prioritize what's a must-have versus a nice-to-have. I love that. Love that.
One other thing that I would say too, that I love to do when I'm taking on a new role, which in a leadership role, I'm not carrying as many recs now, but I definitely recommend my people to do, is go shadow someone who's doing it. Join their team meetings, immerse yourself in that as much as possible. If they have like a weekly team meeting, do that so you can just like, it's like learning by osmosis. You hear the words that you're using, you hear about how they're talking about things, and you really understand it, not just like the surface level can speak it.
I like that. I like that. Anything to add here, Trent, or is that everything on that?
I'm not following that.
Um,
The only thing, actually, I do have something. So everything that Lindsay said, but one of the final questions that I like to ask in the intake is, Mr. and Miss Hiring Manager, what are the 3 questions you want to see answers to whenever I present this candidate?
That's a great.
That usually tells me the priorities without me having to actually ask for the priorities. And it also helps both of us be able to gauge time, because I like to do flybys. I'll interview a couple of candidates, go, I really like these 3, let me send them over, and I answer those 3 questions. And I can tell by the feedback, of the 3, where should I really dig in and find more candidates like A, B, or C? And the other thing, as far as like the intake goes, and I think there was a question in there about how do you help managers identify what skills they need? There's a fantastic book out there. It's 2010, I think. It's called The Who Interview. It is a completely different way of, so rather than tell me about the roles and responsibilities, I ask our clients, how do you define success now in this role? And then Lindsay already hit on it. How are you going to define success in a year? Okay, so what competencies do we need from this? It sounds like you need someone analytical, and I've got a list that they can choose from, and I tell them to choose 5. And okay, based off of that, here are the questions that we're going to ask in the interview. So I'm already not just building out the job description and setting those expectations. I'm already also getting my interview guide ready, because what happens is you'll get a manager goes, yeah, skill-based, rah, rah, rah. And then they go to interview and they're interviewing against the qualifications, and you're like, no, nah, bro, this is not how we do this, So if you make sure that intake is setting up your interview and your evaluation process. And this goes back to the audit process, that if you've got that documented and the managers are following it and you get some kind of an audit, it's going to stand a lot more tall than just going, I think they interviewed this way. No, we established this.
Ooh, I like that.
Copilot from Microsoft is a fantastic thing. And my favorite prompt in ChatGPT is explain this to a high schooler.
That's great.
Especially in tech, like, some of these things, I'm like, I don't know what this is.
Oh, I do want to say with ChatGPT, fantastic resource, but also apply that critical thinking skills. Totally. I say this all the time. Don't take it on the face. I think Lindsay said that. Always apply those critical thinking skills when you use these tools. Yes. Sometimes you got to come in between ChatGPT. Sometimes it's off a little bit, but it's a great resource for sure. Yeah.
And if you send me an email or put a post on LinkedIn that says, in the dynamic, ever-changing world of recruiting, just understand I'm not going to read it because I know that ChatGPT wrote
it. Right. Right. So let's say at the candidate review stage, right?
Okay.
How should a recruiter in this model review the LinkedIn profiles and resumes? Are we looking at it differently? Are we training our eye to look at a profile differently with this particular model?
Lindsay, I don't know about you, but I don't see there being any difference, because rather than qualifications, I'm looking for skills. So it's to me, it's the same competency. The problem with that is that, unfortunately, so we have trained our candidate pool across the nation to show their qualifications on LinkedIn. And now we're doing a shift to going, hey, we want to hire based on skills, but they haven't updated their skills. So, you do need to kind of keep that in mind, that if you're doing skill-based hiring, you're not only ahead on the hiring front, you're also ahead on the candidate front. So you need to make some accommodations there. And again, this is where, there are some tools out there that leverage AI and machine learning for sourcing that does just that. It'll make an inference saying, okay, well, this person has an AWS certification. They've been a software developer. I'm sure, based off of all of my infinite knowledge as an AI, I'm sure that they will meet this particular skill that Trent's looking for, and they'll recommend it. That's the power. To me, that is the power of augmented intelligence. It's not artificial intelligence in my world. It's augmented intelligence.
Yeah. I think the only thing I would add to that is that I think you're right. It's a little bit of like a shift in what we're looking for on resumes and LinkedIn profiles. And in my mind, it kind of goes back to like the definition of a skill is that you're able to perform it successfully, right? And so then for each role, what does perform successfully mean? And then within like the like maybe 5 focus skills of that role, what does perform successfully mean? And then look for some of those descriptors in which you're going to see more in resumes, and if people have built out their LinkedIn profiles, which they don't always build out. But there's that. And I think the other thing too is that longevity could kind of play a role in looking at like, now we have to be careful because the last couple of years have been really tumultuous. So take it with a grain of salt. But if someone has longevity or like steady career progression, then obviously it shows that they have displayed adequate enough skills to be able to either remain employed or progress in their career. So it kind of goes back to like the performance-based approach. So I would say it's like, I think a lot of people are already looking at resumes and profiles in that way. So I think it'll just be more of a focus on that, if anything.
And if I could add, so you talked about going and sourcing and looking at things differently. I think how we package that I might be skipping your process, Lachez, I'm sorry. But the candidate presentation, we also need to amend. Whenever I work for large institutions or work with agencies, they go, here's a resume. I'm like, well, I could have done that. To me, the agencies that I loved working with, I know everything short of their blood type, and I'm like, that's the kind of candidate that I want to talk to. So I think that if you have that, like at Hatchworks, I am obsessed with providing a boutique experience to our clients. So we follow kind of a standard format of here's a little bit about the candidate. Here's how the candidate relates directly to the job position. Mm-hmm. And if you have the skills, that's where you kind of relate those skills. You need, you want 4 years of analytical experience. This person has worked in data analytics for this. You do that side by side comparison. So don't forget that how you present that candidate needs to line up with what you had on the intake and how the interview process is going to go as well. It's critical that it is seamless. There's a seam throughout the entire process. Because what I find is organizations change it on the front end and then are surprised that they hired the same kind of person in the back end. It's like, well, you didn't change the rest of the stuff. You didn't change how you presented it. You didn't change how you interviewed or how you evaluated. That's called the definition of insanity. You just did the same thing and called it skill-based.
Right. That's exactly. You can't interchange a conventional method with the skills-based method, right? It has to be skills-based the entire process from the beginning to the middle and to the end to be consistent in the model, right?
And can I be a nerd for just a second? Master of useless knowledge. So Alexander the Great, whenever he landed in Persia, there was a little bit of unrest because it was going to be a major undertaking, and some of his generals were asking questions like, what are we going to do? And so he understood there was some fear. So overnight he burned the ships that they came in on. They woke up the next morning, they're like, how are we going to get back to Greece? He goes on Persian ships. Like, he eliminated the exit and said, all we can do is move forward. If you're going to go all in on skill-based, you're going to have to burn the ships. If you're doing it in transition and going, okay, for a large organization, I'm going to handle this division first. Once you lock in and load and say, we're not going back, burn the ships, get rid of the old job descriptions, don't let them have access to it, and push them forward. Because if not, then they're going to teeter back and forth to whatever meets the candidate that they want to hire, whenever there's better candidates out there for them.
Totally. And one of the ways that we've burned our ships here is that I've told hiring managers, we will not move people to hiring manager calls until we have your entire interview plan with all of your skills, all of your questions, and assigned to everyone. And then we do a pre-interview kickoff with the interview team to make sure that they're all aligned. But we will not move forward because otherwise, we all know this, we start moving into it and then it kind of slips. And then it just becomes like, well, now we're 3/4 of the way through. What's the point in doing it at this point, right?
You and I should open up our own recruiting.
I love this. You guys are fantastic. Fantastic. This is best in class, folks. Best in class.
Yeah. We'll just call it the Hammer. That's the name of our recruiting ad. The Hammer.
We just make Google
the Hammer Boutique. The Hammer Boutique.
Yes.
So are we asking more situational questions at the candidate screen stage. For this model, is it important to do that? So for example, we've already seen the skills, perhaps in the skills section or what have you, in the LinkedIn profile. So you've already seen that. So once we do the screener, are we asking how have you performed such skill?
Yeah, definitely. So going back to what I just mentioned, interview plan, I created a template that we have our hiring managers fill out at kickoff. They're responsible for identifying the 4 to 5 skills and then also including Udemy's core values, at least 1 to 2 core values. And so if you think of kind of like a chart, we have the who's doing the interview, the stage of the interview, how long it is, and then the skills, values, attributes that each section, that each person will be assessing. And then it goes down and it breaks out even farther. So it has recruiter phone screen stage. I'll use myself in this example, Lindsay. And then it'll have like the 3 to 4. I think 3 is a good number. Skills, values, attributes to assess. Then and then there's another chart. So there's the skill, value, attributes, and then questions tied to it. In a half-hour call, 3 questions is more than enough. But sometimes, so like when I hired for my team, I had more because I wanted to be able to pivot consistently depending on if someone had strength in like stakeholder partnerships versus sourcing. I wanted to be able to kind of understand both sides. So 3 questions is really enough in a 30-minute call. And then we use Greenhouse. So we actually build that into the scorecard. And now when I, as a recruiter, am filling out my scorecard that the hiring manager can see, I am assessing so Greenhouse does strong yes, all the way to strong no. I'm giving them a star in that area in each specific skill. And then I also have the questions and the answers and some general thoughts. And so we recently had a situation where a hiring manager was interviewing 2 internal people, and they were both amazingly qualified in very opposite ways. So she had a really, really hard time figuring out how she wanted to move forward. And what she did was we worked together and she pulled up all of the scorecards and assigned number values. So for any no or strong no, it was -1, -2. For any yes, strong yes, it was +1, +2. And so she was able to kind of like quantify to see which helped her make her decision. But anyways, that's how we do it, in just like a really prescriptive way. So that way, when the scorecard comes through, the hiring managers can make faster decisions. Because then they also understand like the weight of their skill, which one is more important than others, and they can see how candidates scored. Crystal, I would just need to scrub up the template a little bit because it's kind of for internal purposes. And let me just check with my company, and then if I can, I'll send it to Joshua and he can send it out.
Yeah, it sounds like a legit template. I think let me go through some of these questions fairly efficiently. I'll use that word. We talked a little bit about pitching the candidates to the hiring managers. Is there anything else that we want to share with other recruiters listening in terms of how to do that effectively that we haven't covered already?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, outside of doing a song and a dance.
So, I mean, Lindsay has her template, so I think that we've covered that. What about, do we feel that this model requires more kind of high touch service delivery? That's a question that I had. Do we have to spend more time on the phones versus email? Talk to us about that a little bit, if you could.
So I loved the other day whenever LinkedIn shut down for a little while. Well, one, it kind of freaked me out because I've been writing a lot about how much LinkedIn is getting on my nerves. I was like, they finally caught me. And then I got on Twitter and realized that it was an outage. But what I noticed on Twitter is all these people going, this is going to affect my productivity because I can't email people and da-da-da. And I went back, old school, 2004, where, my little cube had all these phone books, I think that we've gotten too far away from the human aspect of recruiting. All right. And it hurts my heart to see how many recruiters are out there actually looking for a job. And I've got friends that are. And it's ironic to hear them say, I submitted my thing. I got an email back. They sent me an assessment. I completed the assessment, and then they sent me another assessment. They're like, at what point do you pick up the phone and call someone? And I
Right.
think that as a recruiting industry, we have got to get back to that heart. We've gotten way too easy of, let me send, oh, I sent 1,000 emails. Okay, how many phone calls did you make? None.
Mm.
Okay. Like for me, it just computes and I just go, I don't even know how to process that. How can you say you're not making any effort? So I think that this does force us to have more conversations. And especially one of the things I like about ChatGPT is that now people are going, I wonder if ChatGPT answered that questionnaire that I sent them. The only way to find out is to pick up the freaking phone and call them, or have a video conference with them, talk to them, and,
Right.
really truly evaluate who they are because kind of a Lord of the Rings reference, I see recruiters as being Gandalf. We slam that staff down and go, you shall not pass. And it's to protect our organization. And if we do what we're supposed to do on the front end, HR doesn't need as many HR partners because they're not dealing with employee relations issues. They're not dealing with performance issues. We are the gatekeepers. And until we own that, we're going to continue to be seen as like second-class citizens in HR. So I think that the skill base is going to force us to have more human conversations, not just with our candidates, but also with our managers. We talked about that intake, push, ask, be consultative. I think we've gotten to be order takers. And then what I love about the industry is we complain about being order takers. I'm like, you did it to yourself. Made your bed, lay in it now.
I love that. I love that. Question about time to fill. Do we feel that this model improves our time to fill? How does it impact it?
Oh, Lindsay, please. I hate time to fill. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's an absolute improver. It helps with, we all have hiring managers who are kind of like fickle decision makers, and sometimes they go to make it a democratic decision and then it becomes really convoluted. But having those really specific scorecards gives your hiring managers the ability to move a lot quicker. It also creates transparency in the interview process on the interviewing side, and you can convey some of that to the candidate, obviously with whatever you think is appropriate. We've seen our time to fill go down pretty significantly from using this model. I think last year we were at 100 days from role opening to someone starting. We're now down at 80. So it's definitely a big impact.
Would you both agree that this model allows you to build more sustainable placements or have more sustainable placements, as well as building, I would say, solid relationships with the hiring managers and teams beyond that one recruitment?
It does, and shifting away from these very binary qualifications that you have to recruit against, it allows you to be able to create a talent pool. All right. So I'm interviewing someone for position A. They've got all of the profile skills that the hiring manager is looking for, but they're also very similar to something over here that's completely different. I'm a perfect example. Why in the world would you take someone who has led sales organizations in major financial institutions and let them be a recruiter? I spent the first 6 months of my career as a recruiter, contract recruiter, being told you'll never be successful. And I didn't believe them because there was a difference. Whenever I sat down with a hiring manager, I could talk business. I knew what back end yield spread was. I knew how to recruit because I had to do it myself because I had sucky recruiters supporting me. So I think that, having that candidate pool with these skills, we have a data engineering pool. Okay. The tech stack could be Snowflake or Azure or whatever. That's the only two that I know, but there's a whole bunch of other ones in there, right? That's what ChatGPT is for. But I know that they have the acumen and the skills that we're looking for to be a good data engineer. The rest of it is just part of a Rubik's Cube, trying to make sure that they fit within the role that the client or that we need internally. So again, I do think that this does change the game a little bit. And I think that it opens us up to be able to, because all of us in all of our career, we've all fallen in love with that one candidate. We just could not find a place in the organization because they were, they were round and trying to fit in a square peg. Now everything's circle. We just got to figure out which block is going to be the best one to put them in. And to me, that's what I get excited about.
Yeah. I think one exciting thing we can talk about as we kind of close things out is in your opinions, what are some of the missed opportunities with companies not adopting this model? I think there's a lot of missed opportunities, but I want to hear from both of you.
Recruiter burnout, that's for sure. I think that there's a new level of excitement. Again, if you're doing this for the human reason and you're able to get someone who normally would not qualify in your old regimented, however you want to call it, there's a whole bunch of other words. I was trying to think of something because Josh said I couldn't cuss, but all the bad things about the qualifications, the very limiting thing, right?
Right.
This opens up and it makes your job a lot more enjoyable, because to me, it's like I'm the consultant for my manager and the agent for my candidate. All I got to do is find the right fix. It's like I'm doing date matching,
Yes.
versus square peg, round hole, square peg, round hole. To me, that's just, again, it's transactional, and I don't function in that space.
I would say the other major one, I mean, there's a lot, but the other major one, I think, is that it removes this barrier that doesn't need to be there for education. And it opens up opportunities from people from so many more communities that have these skills that can then grow into them and learn and develop. And I think also, I mean, Trent, you're a great example of someone moving from one function to another, because there are a lot of those core skills that are needed in both. But I really think that the biggest miss in not doing this is that you're keeping this door shut and you're keeping this wall up from so many people who would absolutely thrive in these opportunities if they had the chance.
And this is probably going to be ironic coming from the white guy on here, but that limiting factor, 80% of the time it affects an underrepresented group. They're the ones that suffer whenever you're looking at these very binary, this kind of coat of armor, price of admission. Whenever you open it up and show the skill sets, that's when you're giving opportunities to the people who really need it, and they'll do it, and they'll have such a loyalty. I'm sorry, that whole subject just really, it gets me upset to think of how many people out there have been barred because of some stupid measure that does not measure success,
Right.
And also too, if your organization is going and doing skill-based, I want to challenge every one of those organizations to take that skill base that you're looking for and go into your community and start training people on how to do it.
Yes, I love
Lead
it.
your
I
own
love
boot
it.
camps, lead your own thing, create your own talent pools, find those people in the community that will benefit the most from getting that. You think, oh, that's a $50,000 paying job. For some of these people, that is life-changing. Go out there and do it. You'll benefit, the community will benefit, and it'll get you out from behind that wall that you like to hide from.
I think to both of your points here, I think the model is transformational. I think it allows recruiters to do the work that a lot of us want to do, right? Again, back to the human thing, back to the right thing, back to the work that we enjoy doing as recruiters, that strategic work. This allows you to do that in this model, understanding, matching skills with the actual role, not these just generic criteria that doesn't really mean anything. So I think it allows us to have more meaning in our work. I think it's so important. And I think there's an opportunity to miss out. You both said it, on a tremendous amount of talent, right? So you have individuals that have skilled up in areas outside of their core function, but they're highly skilled in these areas through whatever means they acquired those skills. They are very talented. And so they could be even more talented than someone that meets the conventional requirements. So they've been in this discipline for 15 or 10 years even, right? They're actually more skilled. If you were to do like a testing evaluation on that individual or look at their writing sample, they're better or more proficient in that area. They'll never be seen because they didn't meet those conventional criteria. And that is a mistake.
It is. Can I give, oh, I'm sorry, Lindsay.
No, I was just going to say, for anyone who, if this is kind of your first introduction to skills-based hiring, my first introduction was last year. Udemy is a skills development platform. So of course we're talking about it here, right? And so it's taken me a decent amount of time to really understand, really intrinsically understand, believe, and implement, and then force it on my hiring managers. But there are a ton of podcasts available, sessions like this. There's great articles out there. There's there's a lot of talk about it. There are few examples of it being done, but find those before you start doing it so that when you start to do it, you're really grounded in understanding it. And that way, like when you're challenged against it, because it is a challenge, it's asking at least the way I do it, it's asking hiring managers to do a lot of work up front. It's like that slow it down to speed it up side of it, but just like make sure you really believe in it before you go and launch it. And like Trent said, maybe even consider starting with like a little pocket first.
Oh yeah, always start small. That way you tick off a few people, overcome those objections, and then learn and get prepared for,
and have them champion it.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the thing I think that we miss so often is if you start with a little group and you involve them and say, I want you to help me create this process. So when I came up with Sprint Recruiting and we were kind of rolling it out throughout the bank, by the time we got to the largest population, which was retail, they were craving it. They had already heard everything that had happened, all the accountability, the transparency and everything on the other side of the bank. And this group, metrics, they live and die by metrics, so to be able to have recruiting metrics was just like a godsend for them. But it started with me overcoming that big group that I said, they're either going to get on board or I'm going to have to replace all of them because I'm calling a hitman. That's the only way that we're going to go. But they became such champions and they helped us make Sprint Recruiting methodology better with their feedback. But I approached it from a partnership rather than this is what we're doing. And I think that a lot of times in recruiting, we go, this is what we're doing. This is something new and sexy. Sherm said it's great, and your hiring manager goes, who the hell's Sherm? Sorry, Josh, I tried. I almost made it. Almost made it to the end. I just want to go on record. I almost made it to the end. They're like, who the heck is Sherm? It has no basis. And to touch on Lindsay's thing, if you do reach out and you do find someone in another organization's already done it, learn from it, but ask them for their baseline data. Because whenever you come back, you can say, I know Lindsay at Udemy has done it. I talked to her about it. Here's some of the things that she ran into. And oh, by the way, here's some baseline information that she provided me about how the process worked and what they've been able to see.
Wow. There's a question in the chat regarding executive recruiting. And
Absolutely.
If the processes are the same.
Yes, even more so on the executive side. Because to me, the fish rots at the head. If you don't have the right leaders in place, the rest of the organization will suffer. So for me, and Lindsay, I don't know about you, but for the executive, like there's so much front end work on that before I even get that plane off the runway.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're using the same process for our executive roles. And again, I mean, there are so many benefits of it. Like to you as a recruiter, the biggest benefit is that hiring managers can make more informed, faster decisions because again, for us, we're using Greenhouse. It's incorporated into our scorecards. They're able to measure what the anticipated proficiency is in each of their designated skill attribute areas.
I think it's a great question because I think that not for the two of you because you're fantastic, but I think that oftentimes in the executive realm when you're doing recruitment, I think some of this kind of skills verification is missed, right? Yeah. So when you have the shiny name, so you've worked for X company that's a big company and you were a CEO there, so I can just move them over into another big organization that's totally different just because they were the CEO over there, and that's just not the case, and I've seen that fail time and time again. Just because someone was a CEO and ran a retail store for Microsoft doesn't mean that they're a good fit for a big retailer, right? You still have to verify those skills as it relates to that business, or you can still see the failure that we've seen.
True. And you're doing it at scale. That's
right.
The issue with the executive. If you're hiring at the lower level, it's a one-off, two-off, you can kind of hide that. You miss on the executive, there's all kinds of things. And two, again, just let me press on the recruiters. On the executive, as a recruiter, you have got to have a voice. I mean, I have gone toe-to-toe with the COO of an international bank who fell in love with this person because they were all kinds of beautiful and sexy and attractive on LinkedIn and all this other kind of stuff. There was something in my soul that said, I can't put my finger on it, but this is not going to be a good hire. And so I remember telling the COO, I said, you will hire him over my cold, dead body. And so we avoided it. He went and worked for another bank who was very close with the COO. COO found out all kinds of things. And he picked up, he goes, I found this out. And I said, do you want me to say I told you so now, or do you want to finish the story? I'm just need to know when I can insert that. So as an executive recruiter, you've got to make sure that those executives that you are being even more strict in this skill-based assessment than some of your entry level.
And I know we're over time, but like you brought up a good point that like having those defined skills aims to eliminate bias. Because now I'm not getting on a call and I have freckles. I see that somebody else has freckles. We want to talk about our freckles.
Oh, yeah.
Now I'm like in a great mood. So I'm unconsciously asking easier questions. No, I have these questions defined. I stick to them. I ask candidates the same ones and I'm measuring them all on the same scale. So it aims to eliminate bias.
Yeah, that's what we're here for. As the recruiters, we're here to be the consultants. Back to that again, the consultancy. Joshua's back.
Josh, I did it. 2 minutes. Next time I'll try to make it the whole time.
I think you did great. I mean, hey, I get you involved for a reason. And I've got a lot of trust for everybody here. Lashez, wow, this is the first webinar you've moderated for our team. A round of applause.
Fantastic.
I love it when I identify great moderators. So thank you so much for leading this discussion. Would welcome the chance to work with you again. Lindsay and Trent, wow, absolutely amazing insights that you both delivered today. Can't thank the three of you enough. But most importantly, or as importantly, I want to thank CoderPad for making today's presentation possible. Thank you to all of you that tuned in to today's content, because you give us the reason for doing this. Please continue to support this program. If there's topics that you think we should be covering, please reach out, let us know, because we want to make sure we're bringing you the content that you need to know about. If you can refer a speaker, we're always open to that. If maybe you're ready to get on stage and join us up here and share some of your insights, reach out about that too, because we're always looking for fresh faces to include in our programming. And without any further ado, Lashez, I'll let you take it away, but I just wanted to jump on and thank everyone. So thank you.
Yeah, well, it's been fantastic. I'll just consider both of you my friends, whether you like it or not.
I'm down.
You are stuck with me as Joshua is, but thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure. And hopefully it's been really helpful for everyone else, but everyone enjoy the rest of your day. It's been amazing. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
So we could have totally talked for another hour.